warpath against third parties is intensifying, and it's rather disturbing to see how quick the establishment media has been going after people like RFK Jr., Dr. Cornel West, Jill Stein, libertarians, all independents. And the reason why it's been this bad, especially now, and it's a good thing and a bad thing. All right. The good thing is free press is better than no press. The bad thing is that we've got a lot of Americans hypnotized by the propaganda that third parties and independents are spoilers. And to be clear, as I've said before on the show so many times, I have my criticisms of Dr. West, Jill Stein, RFK Jr., the libertarians, all of that. I have my criticism of all these politicians, to be fair. But the reason why third parties are getting this attack is because the Democratic primary was lackluster. There was nothing really to focus on. Now that Biden has secured the nomination, at least as it stands right now, we'll see how the DNC convention plays out. We will be covering it when it comes here in Chicago between August 19th to the 22nd, so stay tuned to Hard Lens Media for that. Third parties are now being viewed as a viable threat to both Trump and Biden, probably more so the Biden. And recently, Tulsi Gabbard was on a podcast in which she gave her opinion about whether or not a third-party candidate can be viable and what voters need to consider is at stake for this election. Now, I have my criticism, too, of Tulsi Gabbard, but I did find her perspective and point of view of third parties and independents for this election cycle to be very eye-opening, and I'm starting to get flashbacks, especially from how the 2020 primary and 2020 election cycle played out. So let's go ahead and play it for all you beautiful people. I want to give a huge shout out to Anti-War Misfit. I want to give a huge shout out to them. They were the ones who actually clipped this podcast. There's a lot more to it. Let's go ahead and play this video.
Politically homeless many years ago. I think someone told me that I just got an email from the Dispatch and they were like, oh, a lot of people are politically homeless. Jonathan Haidt just recently was like, I pretty much identify as politically homeless. So I feel like there are a lot of people who feel that way and they can't necessarily hold their nose and vote for Trump for whatever reason. Do you think that we're at a point where there's an opportunity for a third party to really rise and win? Or is this do or die? You have to hold your nose and vote for Trump. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't know yet is the short answer.
Okay.
I am very, it is a little early. I think it's important as people are thinking through this decision, just to be very practical and clear-eyed. You know, I looked at running for president as an independent, and what I learned a lot of lessons from my run in 2020 about what it takes to go and fight these battles on the political front.
Yeah, especially as an independent.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the best way to sum it up for me was my experience running in the Democratic primary in 2020 and having a little bit of naivete in the beginning, thinking like, hey, I know that this is going to be very hard. I know it's going to require a lot of money. I will be outspent and outraised by many of these other big names in politics, but at least I will have as fair a shot as anyone else running to stand on that debate stage and make my case to the American people.
That was your first mistake. Now, look, I remember how that election played out for Tulsi Gabbard, and we here at Hard Lens Media, especially during that primary, there were a lot of articles that we had to debunk. And, of course, even after Tulsi Gabbard wrapped up her campaign, there were so many people saying that she was going to run as a Republican, run as an independent, run as a third party, which never happened. She was going to be part of the Trump administration. Never happened. She was a Russian asset, a Putin puppet, an Assad apologist. All that was fake news. And never forget that Google, not once, but twice, suppressed her name in a search as people were looking more into her campaign, most notably when she destroyed Kamala Harris, not once, but twice on the debate stage. By the way, just to trigger a lot of liberals, Tulsi Gabbard was the last woman candidate in a Democratic primary. It wasn't Elizabeth Warren or Amy Klobuchar or even Kamala the cop Harris. No, it was Tulsi. But as third-party candidates right now are in this situation, especially as we look at how the 2016 and 2020 primaries debates, as well as the general election debates, turned out as well. This might be the first time in a long time in American history where we don't see a presidential debate, period. And this is an opportunity for third-party candidates, especially as they start gaining more momentum. Most notably, Dr. Jill Stein. The Greens have a fair amount, at least a good half of the states to have ballot access. The Libertarians have all the state access right now for ballot access. RFK Jr. behind Dr. Jill Stein and Dr. Cornel West, probably nothing. However, debates are going to be key. And this is a chance for third parties and independents to really get their name out there if they don't get suppressed by the media or either that social media.
Yeah.
About how the Democratic Party needs to return to being the party of JFK and Martin Luther King, the party of freedom, the party of the everyday American in this country. That was an incredibly naive thought, which I learned very quickly.
Interesting.
The attacks on me started from the very moment I literally walked up onto the stage to announce my candidacy. Because I'd been in Congress for many years already. I was a known challenger of the military-industrial complex, of the Clinton, machine, and kind of the untouchable, powerful people in Democratic politics. So they knew who I was and am, and the fact that I was willing to speak the truth, no matter how politically inconvenient it may be. Anyway, I running as an independent, having a third party option, it requires an immense amount of money.
Yeah.
As horrible as that is, it's just reality. Because you're taking on the Democratic Party, you're taking on the Republican Party, you're taking on the mainstream media, you're taking on big tech. You're taking on the military-industrial complex. You're taking on big pharma. You're taking on big education. You're taking on all of these super powerful, entrenched machines who feel threatened.
Yeah.
They feel threatened. And even, I mean, it was no mistake that after Ross Perot mounted a very credible challenge before he dropped out. He was polling higher than Bill Clinton at a certain point. It was not a mistake that both parties came together after that election and made it incredibly more difficult for a third party candidate to even get on ballots.
Wow.
I want to pause here for a second. Now, let's actually talk about what happened, especially after that Ross Perot impact. It definitely cost Bush Sr. the presidency. And there were many people who were excited about having another option besides Democrat or Republican. And since then, third parties and independents have struggled climbing, going through, traveling, traversing across all sorts of terrain across the political landscape, the great land of bureaucracy, dealing with the red tape, forever blocking third parties and independents from having ballot access or being on a debate stage. Anytime a third party candidate made an impact, the Republican Party and Democratic Party at the federal and state level across the country in red and blue states would work together to prohibit third parties and independents from being available for voters to choose from. Now, let's look at some good examples. Ralph Nader, Jill Stein, and even at a state election where you had Jesse the Body Ventura shake things up. This scares a two-party system. Now, our system is corrupt. And to quote Jesse Ventura just last year, he's not on board with having a third or fourth party because it would create, instead of a two-headed monster, we have a four-headed monster, a five-headed monster. We have to abolish all political parties. But right now, our choices as voters is being denied to us. Here in Illinois, Hard Lens Media has covered the fact that the Illinois Green Party, the Illinois Libertarian Party, have had to struggle numerous times just to get ballot access. They have been prohibited from being on the debate stage or talking to their Democratic and Republican counterparts. It's always been a nightmare. And we have had plenty. We have a treasure trove of interviews when we started way back in 2017 with third parties and independents, not only in the state of Illinois, but across this country who we talk to via online. Third parties and independents are the symbol and choice for voters to really reflect their opinions, because the Democratic Party and Republican Party do not represent the values of the American people. And I say this I say this to diehard Democratic voters and Republican voters because I know that a lot of people are comfortable with the choice of voting red and blue. However, when you vote red and blue, know this: those politicians are only hoping that you'd be stupid enough to vote them into office, because that's another chance for them to expand their portfolios. As Unusual Whales has shown, Democratic and Republican lawmakers are expanding their portfolios and doing insider trading. And they also collect that nice donor check too.
Incredibly more difficult for a third party candidate to even get on ballots.
Wow.
It would not surprise me this election year if there are no presidential debates. And for somebody running as an independent, that would be your opportunity to be able to
I didn't even consider
get
that.
the side-by-side comparison and
Right.
actually have that argument in front of the American people.
Right.
Tens of millions of Americans, ideally hundreds of millions if everybody actually watched.
Right.
But this is a year where, Trump has said, I'll debate Biden anywhere, anytime. President Biden chose not to do a very soft, fluffy interview around the Super Bowl, which to me is like, man, if you want kind of the easy exposure during the day that the vast majority of Americans are glued to their television, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? So it wouldn't surprise me if we don't have debate. So all of this is to say there are realities that exist around whether or not a third party candidate can be viable. First and foremost of which is, can they actually get on the ballot? I've gotten to know Bobby and I really like him a lot. But I have a lot of questions about whether or not he will be able to accomplish all that he seeks to accomplish, first and foremost of which is getting on the ballot in all 50 states.
Right.
And so this has been a roundabout way for me to really make the point of, as we go through this process, I encourage people to try to kind of set their emotions aside and their feelings about different candidates and look at the harsh reality of what we are facing. And that harsh reality has been proven by facts and evidence, which is the Biden-Harris administration has been the most radical, extreme, so-called progressive, aggressive.
I do call that into question, the Biden-Harris administration being progressive. They have not been progressive. There's nothing about that administration that's progressive, Tulsi. Okay? Yes, they hide around identity politics, but this administration has been as neoliberal as it can get. And I do wish that people would not connect progressive policies and issues with the Democratic Party. Two different things altogether. This is where you kind of lose me here. The Democratic Party and its values do not represent progressive values. Now, I'm politically homeless, and I know for a fact the Biden-Harris administration is not progressive. Okay, there's nothing about it that's progressive. Hell, I've got conservatives and libertarians sometimes saying to me and reaching out saying, this administration, they're really giving you progressives the middle finger, because a lot of people can see it, not just those on the left, but those on the right. But of course, progressive is a go-to word, just like how you see people on Fox News. Chicago is a socialist communist utopia. No, it is not. There's nothing socialist or communist about Chicago. It is a corporatist neoliberal nightmare that is controlled by the Democratic machine. And the DNC convention is going to be one hell of a ride.
Administration ever in our country's history. And they're proud of it. And if they are allowed to remain in power, we've already seen how boldly they are willing to take away our freedom in every respect. How willing they are to have big tech silence and censor us at their behest.
I'm still worried about the currency.
Yes, the central bank digital currency, how they want to control our money. If you allow someone to control your wallet, they control your freedom. They are trying to suppress our free speech. They are violating our civil liberties and arresting everyday Americans who happen to challenge their authority and politics. The list goes on and on. And
now she is correct on this one. For example, the Biden-Harris administration, as well as Democrats at the state level, have been prohibiting independents and third parties from being on the ballot. Or either that, when RFK Jr. and let's go ahead and add in Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips, they were denied Secret Service protection. Of course, Trump also had to deal with the fact that he was going to be kicked off the ballot, even though the Supreme Court found that to be unconstitutional, and now he still is. Of course, the Democrats would do everything they can to make sure he's not on the ballot. But this administration has also been super involved in the censorship and suppression of information on social media. Most notably, this administration's war on TikTok, even though Biden did a wonderful Super Bowl TikTok using that Chinese app.
I had to
Just
write a
border.
book that I literally was editing up until the very day I was forced to send it to the printer, because unfortunately there are more and more examples every day.
Yep.
The fact is, and this is a fact, if they are allowed to remain in power, we will likely we will not be able to come back from the erosion and destruction of our freedoms and constitution. Because what we have seen over these last 3+ years will only get worse. Because even if, first of all, because this is who they are, this is what they're committed to. And second of all, as we see in these elections, even if they won by one vote, one electoral vote, they would run around the country telling the American people, you have given us a mandate to continue doing exactly what we've been doing. That's a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
When you look at the consequences on our quality of life, on the economy, inflation, debt, the lack of any kind of border security at all, national security threats. We have multiple wars bubbling up on different fronts around the world on in virtually every example I could give you on the home front as well as on the foreign policy front. They are destroying us, and we cannot allow them to continue. So, okay, so if we're taking Biden, Harris, whoever may be, popping up on the Democrat front, I think it's important that we just remain very clear-eyed about the best decision for us at this very moment to save our country.
So let's talk about what the Democrats could possibly do. And of course, addressing Tulsi Gabbard as well, because I find many of the issues that she does stand for questionable. No, I want to be clear. There are some things that she has said in the past that I've agreed with. However, her current stances right now, I really don't know what to make of it. But in regards towards what is happening to third parties and independents, do they have a viable chance this election cycle? Possibly. Can a third party candidate actually get and secure an electoral college vote? Really depends on where they want to put their eggs in one basket, because we all know election integrity is non-existent in this country. We all know that election integrity is hard to achieve in this country. And we all know too well that both parties want to do everything they can to suppress voters from actually exercising their choice. So good luck to all the third-party candidates out there. And as for the Democratic Party, when it comes down to this convention that will be coming up, the Democratic Party is going to do everything it can to indicate that they want or should earn or receive your vote so they can get a quote-unquote mandate. A mandate for what? More of the same. As Biden said, nothing will fundamentally change during the 2020 primary. He also made it very clear during his debates with Donald Trump that nothing would fundamentally change. This administration has partook in probably the most huge and unprecedented wave of suppression and censorship than any other administration before. And because of the power of the internet, and because of what we've seen happen on Facebook and Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, the super incredible rush to silence and suppress dissenting voices has never been higher. The Democratic Party, as an institution, with the Biden-Harris administration as their loyal puppet, are going to do everything they want to ensure that you are denied that right to vote. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, okay, a broken clock can be right twice a day. I'll agree with her on this. But as for everything else, you're kind of losing me. But there is this rush for censorship, and we need to be aware of just how bad it can get. Keep your heads on a swivel. 2024 is not over yet, but all lies will be revealed, to quote Cat Williams.